Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are going deep on attachment theory.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is a good one, right?
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah.
So attachment theory, that's that area of psychology that looks at how, our bonds early on in life.
Right.
How those bonds shape our relationships later in life as adults.
Huge topic.
Huge topic. And we've got a lot of great sources lined up for this one.
Yeah, we do.
We've got experts from YouTube channels like MedCircle, SciShow, Psych2Go, and more.
A lot of therapists, a lot of psychologists, even some personal stories in there.
Yeah, definitely some personal stories.
Yeah.
So by the end of this deep dive, you will not only grasp the core concepts of attachment theory,
Right.
but also you might just walk away with a clear understanding of your own relationship patterns.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe even some aha moments about the people in your life.
It's amazing how much those early bonds can impact us. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
The ripple effects are everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, romantic relationships, friendships, careers, even physical health. Yeah. Research from Minnesota University and Harvard, ties it all together.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So let's kick things off with the basics.
Yeah.
What is attachment theory?
Okay, so at its core, attachment theory is all about the deep emotional bond between an infant and their primary caregiver. Usually that's mom or dad.
Right.
And this bond, it's like a blueprint for how we connect with others later in life.
Okay.
Influences how we handle emotions, approach intimacy, even how we see ourselves.
So you're saying that those early experiences really can set the stage for our relationships as adults.
100%. There's a powerful quote from psychologist John Bowlby that kind of sums it up perfectly. He said, "What cannot be communicated to the mother cannot be communicated to the self," highlighting how much those early relationships shape our understanding of ourselves and how we interact with the world.
Wow, that is really profound.
Yeah.
It makes you think about, the lasting impact of those early years.
It does.
But okay, so how does this actually play out in real life? How do we see attachment theory manifest?
Well, that's where the 4 attachment styles come in.
Okay.
Identified by Mary Ainsworth, they paint a picture of how people relate to others.
All right, so let's break those down because I know from the videos we've got there's secure attachment.
Right. Secure attachment is often considered the ideal. So picture baby Luca from one of the videos. Even after his father's death, his world stayed pretty stable because of his mom, consistent care.
Okay.
Securely attached people as adults, they're comfortable with closeness, but they're also independent.
Right.
They communicate their needs while they can navigate intimacy without too many issues.
They sound pretty well adjusted.
Right.
Okay, so what about the other styles?
So there's anxious preoccupied attachment.
What?
Little Anne from the Sprouts video, after she lost her father's attention, she became super clingy people with this style. As adults crave intimacy, but they're afraid of abandonment.
Right.
So that can make them overly dependent on their partners.
That makes sense. It sounds like a lot of anxiety can come with that style for sure. What about the people that kind of push people away?
So that's dismissive avoidant attachment.
Okay.
Remember the story about the guy who always chose long-distance relationships?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
So these individuals, they prioritize independence, may appear distant, emotionally unavailable because they've learned to suppress their needs.
That's interesting because they might seem like they're strong and independent.
Totally.
But deep down, they could be struggling with vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the rarest style, fearful avoidant attachment, like Amy, who was raised in a chaotic and sometimes abusive nursery.
Oh, wow.
These individuals have this push and pull dynamic.
Yeah.
They desire closeness, but at the same time, terrified of intimacy, often sabotage relationships.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
So we've got these 4 distinct styles, but is it really as black and white as that? Do people always fit neatly into one category?
It's more of a spectrum. Most people fall somewhere in between these categories.
Okay.
Displaying a blend of different traits.
Yeah.
You could even lean towards different styles and different relationships depending on who you're interacting with.
That's helpful to keep in mind. It's kind of like what Kyle Kittleson from MedCircle was talking about. He identifies strongly as dismissive avoidant, but he emphasizes that it's not his entire personality.
Exactly. Attachment styles are valuable, for understanding ourselves and our relationships, but they don't define us completely.
That's a really important reminder.
Yeah.
So we've got these 4 attachment styles now. How do these styles actually develop? Is it all about how we were raised?
Well, it's nature and nurture. Some babies are just born with more sensitive temperaments, which might make them more prone to anxiety.
Right.
But parenting plays a huge role in shaping attachment.
Okay.
Different parenting behaviors can contribute to each of the 4 styles.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit if we're looking at secure attachment. What kind of parenting usually leads to that?
So think stable, affectionate, responsive parenting. When a caregiver is consistently attuned to their child's needs and provides a safe, loving environment that fosters a sense of security and trust.
Right.
Those kids grow up feeling confident that their needs will be met.
Okay.
And they're better equipped to handle the ups and downs of relationships.
That makes sense. So what about anxious, preoccupied attachment? What factors contribute to that?
Inconsistent or unpredictable parenting can really contribute to this style.
Yeah.
So think of those busy parents from the videos. Sometimes they're engaged, but other times they're too exhausted to be present.
Yeah.
It creates this uncertainty for the child, and they develop this fear of abandonment.
It's almost like they learn that they can't always rely on their caregivers to be there for them.
Exactly. And now dismissive avoidant attachment.
Okay.
This often develops when parents discourage emotional expression or prioritize work over relationships.
Right.
It sends the message that the child's needs aren't as important, so they learn to suppress those needs and become really self-reliant.
So it's like they're adapting to an environment where emotional closeness isn't readily available.
Exactly. So fearful avoidant attachment.
Okay.
This is often linked to erratic or emotionally unavailable parenting. So imagine a caregiver who's sometimes loving and attentive,
Right.
but other times completely withdrawn or even frightening.
Oh, okay.
Creates a really confusing and distressing experience for the child.
Yeah.
They long for connection, but they've also learned to fear it because it can be unreliable or even painful.
It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
They want intimacy, but they're also terrified of it. It makes you wonder how much of our parenting is based on instinct versus learned behavior,
Right.
generational patterns.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to understand these patterns and how they might be playing out in our own lives.
And that leads us to our next big question.
Sure.
How do these attachment styles show up in adulthood?
Let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how these early experiences might be influencing our relationships today.
Cool.
Okay, so we've got a good understanding of attachment theory now. How those early bonds can really shape our attachment styles as kids.
Right.
But let's get into how this actually plays out in real life as adults.
Yeah.
How these styles show up in our relationships as adults,
Yeah.
our careers, our friendships, all that stuff.
Things get really interesting here because it's like those early patterns we develop as kids, they become blueprints for how we interact with other people.
So it's not just about romantic relationships.
Not at all.
Sarah?
It can influence every type of connection we make.
Okay.
So let's start by revisiting secure attachment, the
Okay.
kind of gold standard we talked about.
Right.
What comes to mind when you picture a securely attached person in their adult life?
I immediately think about what we were just discussing with baby Luca.
Yeah.
Even though he had a very difficult experience losing his father,
Yeah.
he was able to stay relatively grounded
Right.
because his mom provided such consistent care. So it seems like securely attached people are generally pretty resilient.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. They're able to weather those inevitable storms of life
Right.
without completely falling apart,
Yeah.
They learn from their experiences, they adapt and move forward. It's like they have this inner compass that helps them navigate challenges and maintain a sense of stability.
Okay, so that inner stability translates into their relationships too.
Absolutely. They tend to have healthy, balanced connections. They're comfortable expressing their needs, setting boundaries, and they can handle, the natural ebb and flow of relationships without getting too derailed.
So it sounds like they've got this whole emotional intelligence thing down.
They do tend to have a good grasp of their own emotions and the emotions of others. They can be independent, but they're also capable of forming those deep, meaningful bonds that so many of us are searching for.
What about their careers? Does attachment style play a role there too?
Oh, yeah. Big-time securely attached individuals often thrive in work environments that offer a balance of independence and teamwork. They can take the lead when needed, collaborate effectively, and handle those high-pressure situations without getting overly stressed.
So they're basically like the people we all secretly envy a little bit, like, oh, they've got it all together.
Well, let's not forget that no one's life is perfect.
Right.
And even securely attached people face difficult situations, but what sets them apart is their ability to bounce back from setbacks and maintain a sense of equilibrium. They have this fundamental trust in themselves and their ability to cope, which helps them navigate those tough times.
Okay, that makes total sense. Now, let's talk about anxious, preoccupied attachment.
Okay.
We touched on this a bit earlier, but I'm curious to hear more about how this actually plays out in those adult relationships.
So remember, this is the attachment style characterized by a deep craving for intimacy,
Right.
coupled with this constant fear of abandonment.
Right.
So they tend to be hyper aware of their partner's moods and actions,
Yeah.
often seeking reassurance and validation.
So it's almost like they have this internal radar that's always scanning for signs of trouble.
Exactly. Any perceived distance or lack of attention can send them into a spiral of anxiety and insecurity.
Oh, that's got to be tough.
And their need for closeness can sometimes lead to behaviors that actually push their partners away,
Right.
creating this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, that's a tough cycle to break.
It is.
And we saw how this can play out in their career choices too, right?
Yeah.
Remember what that therapist on MedCircle was saying about how anxious, preoccupied individuals often gravitate towards jobs where they're part of like a close-knit group?
Right. They're seeking that sense of belonging and validation, and they often excel in roles that involve nurturing or caretaking because they're so tuned into the needs of others.
Yeah, they're very good at that.
But they also need to be mindful of setting boundaries and prioritizing their own well-being. Otherwise, they risk burnout and resentment.
So self-care is extra crucial for this attachment style.
Huge.
Now let's switch gears and talk about dismissive avoidant attachment.
Yeah.
We talked about those folks who prioritize independence
Right.
may appear emotionally distant. I'm really curious to explore like the why behind that behavior a little bit more.
Yeah, it's important to remember that their emotional distance, it's often a defense mechanism,
Right.
a way to protect themselves from getting hurt. It's not that they don't have feelings. It's more that they've learned to suppress them.
So it's almost like they're unconsciously saying, if I don't let myself get too close, then I can't be disappointed or abandoned.
Yeah, and that can definitely show up in their careers, too. Like Kyle Kittleson, he said his dismissive avoidant tendencies actually helped him achieve success professionally,
Right.
but created challenges in his personal life.
Exactly. And what about that anecdote we came across about dismissive avoidant types being drawn to long-distance relationships?
Yeah, that really highlights their desire for connection, but on their own terms. It allows them to maintain a sense of control and avoid feeling overwhelmed or suffocated.
So they're not necessarily against relationships, they just approach them differently.
Exactly.
Now let's dive into the most complex and often misunderstood style, fearful avoidant.
Ooh, yeah.
I feel like this one can be particularly challenging because it's this mix of wanting closeness, but at the same time fearing intimacy and rejection.
It really is a heartbreaking combination.
Yeah.
Imagine that inner turmoil, wanting love, but being absolutely terrified of getting hurt.
It's got to be so confusing.
They can lead to a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors.
So how does that play out in their relationships?
They might send mixed signals,
Sure.
appearing interested one moment and distant the next.
Right.
They might push people away just when things start to get close, or they might build walls around their hearts, making it difficult for others to truly connect.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we know from the research that they're also more prone to experiencing anxiety, depression, and relationship difficulties.
Right. And think about that study we saw about fearful, avoidant individuals tending to have more sexual partners,
Right.
but often lacking deeper intimacy.
Wow.
It suggests a pattern of seeking connection in a way that avoids genuine vulnerability.
That's a really insightful observation. And it makes you wonder how much of this stems from a fear of repeating those painful patterns from their past.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to protect themselves from further hurt.
Yeah.
But in doing so, they're inadvertently preventing themselves from experiencing the kind of deep, fulfilling connection they crave.
So it's like a catch-22.
Totally. And their career choices can also reflect that ambivalence. They might gravitate toward roles that offer a sense of control or autonomy, but they might struggle in collaborative environments or situations where they have to rely heavily on others.
So it's like this constant tension between wanting that connection but fearing its potential consequences.
Yes, it is.
At this point, I imagine some people listening might be feeling a bit overwhelmed, maybe even a little hopeless. Are we really destined to repeat these patterns forever?
That's the amazing thing about attachment theory. It's not a life sentence. We're not doomed to repeat these patterns. While our early experiences shape us, we have the power to change, to rewrite those old scripts.
Oh, that's a relief. So how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is self-awareness. Once you recognize your own attachment style and start to understand how it might be influencing your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors,
Right.
you can start making conscious choices to break free from those unhealthy patterns. And that's what we'll explore in the final segment.
All right, I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those tools and strategies that can help us move towards more secure and fulfilling relationships. Okay, so we've explored these different attachment styles
We have.
and how those early patterns can really show up in our adult lives. But now I want to talk about, what can we do about it?
Right.
Can we actually change our attachment style?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of all of this. We're not stuck with those patterns we developed as kids.
Okay, good.
Our brains have this amazing ability to change and adapt. It's called neuroplasticity. We can actually rewire those neural pathways and create, healthier relationship blueprints.
So it's not like we're stuck with the hand we were dealt.
Yep. Right.
We can reshape these patterns.
Exactly. It takes time and effort,
Of course.
but it's definitely possible.
Okay. So what are some of the tools and strategies that can help us cultivate like the more secure attachment style,
There are so many.
regardless of where we're starting from?
Exactly. Yeah.
I know therapy is often recommended. What specific types of therapy can be helpful for this?
So there are a couple that are really effective for addressing attachment issues.
Okay.
DBT, or dialectical behavior therapy, teaches incredible skills for managing those intense emotions and tolerating distress, which is so helpful for anyone who struggles with, those big feelings that come up in relationships.
So it's about learning to like regulate those emotions instead of letting them control us.
Exactly. And then there's ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, which helps you develop this different relationship with your thoughts and feelings. It's about learning to observe those inner experiences without judgment, without getting swept away by them, and allows you to move forward even when your mind is throwing all kinds of anxieties and insecurities at you.
That sounds really empowering. But what about those everyday moments where those old patterns start to like creep back in?
Right.
Maybe we don't have access to a therapist right then and there. What can we do in those moments?
That's where those self-soothing techniques are so helpful.
Okay.
Even something as simple as taking a few deep breaths can be so powerful.
Right.
It can shift your entire physiological state.
Yeah.
Calm down that fight or flight response that often gets triggered in those anxiety-provoking moments.
It's amazing how much of a difference something so basic can actually make.
It is. Right.
What other self-soothing techniques are helpful?
Mindfulness can be a game changer.
Okay.
Being fully present in the moment without judgment, noticing your senses, your surroundings.
Right.
And it helps you break free from those ruminating thoughts and worries that keep you stuck.
It's like hitting the pause button on that mental hamster wheel.
Exactly. And then there's this technique called thought diffusion,
Okay.
which is all about recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts. They're not necessarily facts or truths. We don't have to believe everything our minds tell us.
Yeah, so it's about kind of detaching from those thoughts and not letting them dictate our emotions and behaviors.
Exactly. It's like watching those thoughts float by like clouds, without getting caught up in the storm.
Oh, I like that analogy. Are there any other strategies that can help us shift those old patterns?
Building independence is another key piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
So, for anyone who tends to rely heavily on others for validation, especially those with anxious, preoccupied tendencies.
Right.
Spending time alone, engaging in solo hobbies, developing a strong sense of self can be super empowering.
Yeah, it's about like reclaiming that autonomy and realizing you can actually enjoy your own company.
Exactly.
Remember that therapist who talked about challenging her clients to go out to coffee or like have a meal by themselves?
Yes.
I always thought that was so interesting.
It's a great exercise. It's about cultivating that inner secure base.
Right.
So you're not constantly seeking it externally.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
What about the people we surround ourselves with? Does that play a role?
Huge. The people we spend time with can have such a big impact on our well-being and our relationship patterns.
Right.
Surrounding yourself with secure individuals, people who model healthy communication boundaries, emotional intelligence,
Right.
can be incredibly beneficial.
It's like their positive energy and their relationship skills kind of rub off on you.
Exactly. And it's not about trying to change other people you know.
Right.
It's about making conscious choices about who you let into your inner circle.
Right. Choosing relationships that feel safe and supportive.
Mutually fulfilling.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And as we're embarking on this journey of personal growth and, maybe even trying to shift our attachment style, it's so important to be patient with ourselves along the way.
Oh my gosh, yes. Change takes time.
Yeah.
It's not always linear. There will be ups and downs, steps forward and steps back.
Right.
The key is to keep practicing those new skills.
Right.
Be kind to yourself when you slip up and celebrate those small victories along the way.
So self-compassion is key. I love that. And before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. Now that we've explored how our attachment style can influence our relationships with others, it's interesting to consider how it might be shaping our relationship with ourselves.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Right.
The way we relate to ourselves often mirrors the way we relate to others. If we tend to be critical or judgmental towards ourselves, we might find ourselves repeating those patterns in our relationships. So cultivating self-compassion, setting healthy boundaries with that inner critic, and taking care of our own needs are all crucial parts of this journey.
It's like we're bringing all these insights full circle.
Exactly. Understanding attachment theory is such a powerful tool for self-discovery and growth. It's not about blaming our past.
Right.
It's about using this knowledge to create a more fulfilling present and future.
So well said to everyone listening. You are not defined by your attachment style. You have the power to create relationships that are secure, authentic, and deeply meaningful. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep growing.
And never underestimate your own capacity for change. You got this.
That's a wrap on this deep dive into attachment theory. Thanks for joining us.